Welcome, family. Thank you for taking the time out to watch the premiere episode of Blood and Earth. I'm really excited about what we can bring to you in terms of information about Afro-Indigenous people, Native American history, African American history, and how they both have intertwined and coalesced and converged, if that makes sense. So, first off, my name is Troy J. Hines. Though I'm also known as Rahoni Wayi, which means black blood in the Tutelo language. I carry this name not just as a title, but as a responsibility, because I come from a lineage that runs deep through the bloodlines of the Tuscarora, Meherrin, and Powhatan Nations. My maternal ancestors, just for some backstory, coalesced in Halifax and Warren County, North Carolina. That's where they're from. Around the sacred grounds of Medoc Mountain. In history, this land and its people were known as Meadows Indians. And over time, they gave rise to what would later be called the Haliwa-Saponi people. So much respect to all of my Haliwa-Saponi cousins, if you're watching. I love all of you guys. And over time, they gave rise to what would be referred, I guess, anthropologists a long time ago, they would refer to that area as the triracial isolate communities. But what they were truly observing was like a fusion of different people, different races, different histories, merging out of warfare, displacement, enslavement, and the relentless pressures of colonial expansion, if that makes sense. So out of necessity, love, survival, and too often violence and exploitation, these communities forged an identity that carry both African and indigenous blood woven into the same fabric. So when most people in America today think of Native people, their minds go westward to the Great Plains, the deserts. They picture the Lakota, the Dakota, the Cheyenne, the Crow, the Apache, the Comanche, the Diné. And these nations are vital relatives, whose stories must be remembered, must be revered, must be honored. But it is important to understand that the story of Turtle Island does not begin nor does it end in the West. Okay, so our story is much bigger than that. It's the entire continent, North and South America, if that makes sense, or continents. So that being said, the East Coast is sacred ground to Native Americans as well. Right? It remains home to people like the Tuscarora, the Powhatan, the Meherrin, the Catawba, the Waccamaw Sioux, the Shinnecock, the Wampanoag, the Muskogee, the Miccosukee, the Seminole, and yes, the Haliwa-Saponi people. Their survival, their resilience, their identities have often been ignored in the broader narrative, especially when their histories intersect with the legacy of African slavery or any kind of African admixture. Very important, right? Now, let me be clear. I don't necessarily subscribe to this new trend that claims every black man and woman labeled African American is actually Native American. I believe we have to look at timelines. Have I read They Came Before Columbus by Dr. Ivan Van Sertima? Of course. Well versed in that. You have to look at the timeline. Do I believe that there could have been Afro-Indigenous people within the Olmec community? Absolutely. But again, we have to look at timeline, and we have to look at how people converge and how human beings have intertwined to become a singular entity or a singular tribe or individual, and what is the timeline associated with that. So the reason that I don't wholeheartedly just subscribe to the entire narrative is because it's misleading if it's done without proper knowledge. And at the same time, it's kind of dismissive to the greatness of African history in itself, right? It's kind of like, are you saying that because you're not proud of being of African descent? As a person who has a background of both African and Native descent, I am proud, equally proud of who I am. But let me be clear, I'm not part this, I'm not part that, I'm all of this and all of that. if that makes sense, right? Because if you turn towards the motherland, you'll find unparalleled brilliance in the wealth of Mansa Musa, the Mali Empire, the intellectual and spiritual traditions of the Songhai Nation, the legacy of the pyramid builders, Kemet, ancient Egypt, the cradle of civilization. In truth, whether you're Sri Lankan or Scandinavian, your lineage goes back to Africa. Every single one of us. So the danger is not the truth of these origins, but it's in how timelines and identities have been blurred by poor research, fractured memory, and the systematic erasure of stories that were inconvenient, let's say, to colonial power, if that makes sense, right? So we must remember that the Spanish were the first Europeans to arrive here. You ask many people that question, they immediately will say the English and forget that in the 1500s, the Spanish arrived here first. And they didn't come alone. So on the ships of the Spanish, if you know a little bit about history and the 7th century Arab conquest from the Middle East into Northern Africa and into Spain, the Moors ruled Spain for 700 years. And some of those Moors were of African descent. Some of them were of Arab descent. Some of them were a mixture of Arab and African descent and West African descent, right? We know that to this day, right? And so when the ships traveled from Spain to the New World, who were on these ships? Again, the sailors, the navigators, the laborers, some of which, because of the 700 years that the Moors ruled Spain, and the Moors were black. Some of those people that traveled in those expeditions in the 1500s to Turtle Island stretched from Florida to Texas into Mexico and as far north as where? North Carolina. So could there have been a Catawba with wavy and curly hair? Could he have had an afro? Absolutely. But again, it's based on the timeline of where that blood came from and the difference between the Eurocentric mentality that if I have a child with you, my child is half this, half that. Or if I have a child with you and I'm of a particular tribe, it doesn't matter. That child is still a part of my tribe. Whether you're looking at the matrilineal heritage or the way that you were inducted into particular tribes, often maternal, but we've even seen that differs depending on the tribe. We know that some tribes, the uncle is more important to the rearing of his sister's children than the actual father. The uncle is the one that rears or shows the boys in his lineage and his family the ways of being a man. But that's for another day in terms of the topic. But it does often complicate and enriches the narrative of who truly touched the soil first, and at the same time what it really means to belong to this land and who those people were and what were their backgrounds, right? And so this podcast, Blood and Earth, shameless plug, right? But I'm very proud of this work. I put my heart and soul into it. So Blood and Earth is based and centered around this book, Blood and Earth, the Afro-Indigenous struggle for identity and survival in North Carolina. So this is really power-packed with a lot of information about the horrors of Fort Kristana, what those children went through, how they were turned into indentured servants and oftentimes were slaved out into colonial households, and even those same children and women, sometimes through rape and sometimes through the capture and indoctrination into slavery directly from the Tuscaroran War, which happened in eastern North Carolina, and directly through the Roanoke, all of those different colonial settlements that were created. And so this goes into those intricacies and at the same time shows the intersection of my maternal heritage and how it intersects multiple layers of times with these occurrences in history. So We're going to explore that history. We're going to explore those intertwined lineages, if you will. And it is a story of survival, memory, pride, struggle, and a story that not only belongs to my people, but to anyone listening who seeks to understand the deeper currents that shaped America. And perhaps that's really where the listener, where you really fit into this equation, right? If you're like me, we're probably cousins, we're probably family. Who knows if you go far back in time. But from the spirit of how Native American people, indigenous people relate to one another, when you're looking at the broader scope that we are all relatives, all part of the human family. So for sure, a part of the indigenous family, we're all relatives. We all have kind of maybe similar backgrounds. So maybe you're a card-carrying member of a recognized tribe, right? Or maybe the truth is your ancestry lives only in your family's oral history, whispered from grandmother to grandchild, but never fully documented. So my recommendation to you would be very, very simple. Research your heritage. I'm lucky that in my family, we always knew exactly who we were, right? That's a part of pride for us because my grandparents, my maternal grandparents, they were from Brinkleyville Township, Halifax County, North Carolina. So not just Halifax County, but Brinkleyville Township specifically. And that's all the proof we needed because that community has long been recognized by anthropologists as a home place of Native American people that coalesced after many of the first contact wars. So you too will find after careful research, if you need, that your bloodlines may carry some of those stories that are older than this nation itself. So that's really all I've got for today is really just an introduction of myself to you, to this platform. Really excited. If you can, like, comment, subscribe. I would love to hear from you all. You'll see a link to find the book on the title page itself within YouTube. And at the same time, you'll see some other links there as well. And, feel free. You'll see my email there. Email me, ask me any questions. I'm a completely an open book in terms of my heritage and in terms of my belief system. And I'll be the first one to how do I say this? I don't have all the answers. I don't come to this thing as a know-it-all. And who knows, maybe some of my views can be changed. Maybe there's other evidence that I haven't seen. But I can tell you that as a person who has been born knowing his indigenous heritage and been studying his indigenous heritage since he was, old enough to remember, and at the same time been able to go to Haliwa-Saponi powwows. I've been able to go to the Yavapai Apache Reservation. I've been able to spend time at the Seminole powwows in Hollywood, Florida, and with the Miccosukee people. So from that standpoint, I do not know everything. I'm an open book. I'm a sponge. I'm learning still on this path and on this path of identity and resilience so that people that have similar backgrounds as we do, as people that straddle that line of being, African American as well as Native American, who consider themselves Afro-Indigenous and do not want to abandon any part of themselves and want to live and love every aspect of who they are. That's who this channel is dedicated to. So feel this as a safe space to be who you are. And hopefully we can all learn from each other.